Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today's Friday, May 30th, the year of our Lord 2025, and this is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Thanks for joining me today. The end of a short work week, hopefully for many of you. And wanted to give you an update on the Chief Sports South Carolina schedule here today. We have decided to do an abbreviated version of Inside the Gamecocks, the show. Today, from 11 to 1, it'll be me, JB, and Phil, the Mad Dog, in a kind of a reunion show, kind of like it used to be before we went to the new format. Going to play some buy or sell. Going to talk about everything that's gone on this week in college football, college basketball, preview the official visit weekend for Carolina. As Matt Anderson from the Late Night Gamecock Show calls it, moving day. A lot of players in that, talking to Alex Jones yesterday, the Gamecocks feel good about some of them. Some of them are going to be dogfights, but it's going to be a big weekend. Of course, the two players from the D.C., Maryland area, Carter Meadows, the defensive end. I said he was borderline 4-star yesterday by 24/7 Sports. I meant to say 5-star guy. Coming in, certainly a guy Carolina's got a little momentum with, but you're battling with him, as I pointed out on the show, the last two national champions in Ohio State and Michigan, plus Penn State that had Abdul Carter that went pretty early in the draft at edge, and a good defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles. And those schools have a deeper history of recruiting the D.C. area than Carolina, but Carolina certainly got some recent history there with 2 5-stars in Nick Harbor and Dylan Stewart, plus Zabari Sandy, and those are just the players that are from inside the Beltway in the district, the surrounding area, suburbs of Maryland. Carolina's got plenty of players from that area, so it helps. Recruiting's contagious. I said way back in 2006 when Clemson signed C.J. Spiller that was going to open some doors for them in Florida because players that are younger look up to the players that are older that are good. And, lo and behold, 4 or 5 years later, they got Sammy Watkins, which was another big time get. I don't know that they would have gotten Sammy had they not gotten CJ, just to be honest. So it's contagious sometimes. I think Carolina getting Jadeveon Clowney and Stephon Gilmore from South Point has made South Point in Rock Hill a bit of a stronghold for the Gamecocks in state. So I look at it that way, and I look at how the staff recruits, and so you're saying there's a chance. There are. Kari Adams is a corner. From there is off a visit from Penn State. He did get a crystal ball prediction from the 24/7 Sports recruiting staff for Penn State with a confidence of 6. That sounds to me like it was just a really, really good visit. And so he'll come in and visit with the Gamecocks and Torian Gray. He's from Towson, Maryland, which is outside of D.C., that same area. And then some other guys like Travis Johnson is a wide receiver from the 757 in Virginia, taller guy. Michigan, Virginia Tech is a possibility. They get the last visit. And talking to Alex Jones yesterday on the Gamecock Smorgasbord, he feels pretty good about that guy. So we'll see what happens. Mike Fury certainly is an excellent recruiter. And so we'll see. We'll see. JB Shabazz, a big offensive tackle from North Carolina, is a player I really like. Pierre Dean, PJ Dean, O-line defensive lineman, also North Carolina. Carolina's battling the Georgia Bulldogs for him. I know not everybody wants to hear Carolina's in on a D tackle, and the other school is Georgia with the way things have gone in recent memory. And it doesn't hurt the dogs that Jared Wilson is a player that was there and was his brother, and so there's family connections to UGA, and we'll see kind of how all that goes. But lots of good players coming in this weekend, and then the next weekend's huge, and then the weekend of the 20th is massive. Speaking of that weekend, want to invite everybody down the wing eating contest, the third annual wing eating contest. We did this when I had Carolina Rise, which was A lot of fun. We actually did one in Charleston and Columbia, kind of a fundraiser, and then we had one last summer at CB18 Bar and Grill in Columbia, another fundraiser. This is also a fundraiser, but just like last year at the end when we made admission free to all Gamecock fans, it'll be free again this year. It's Saturday, June 21st, starting at 4 to 8 at CB18 Bar and Grill in Five Points in Columbia. My wife and I plan to be there, so come on out, see me, see the wing eating contest, which is outstanding. Hang out with folks, meet the players. We'll have more on what players do. It's gonna be open to a lot of different student athletes. Maybe some female versus male wing eating contest, or a female contest, a male contest, if they're willing to do it. I think we've talked to some softball players and things like that. But my man Cox by 90's putting that together with myself and Cock Key Hospitality, which I encourage you to go vote for them. The Free Times has voted them best local Instagram account or something like that in their annual awards, but they're really good people. So that's just a note on that official visit weekend, is that there'll be another event. Pretty cool times down in Columbia. Boy, can't wait to get to Columbia in late June, right? That's beautiful weather. Anyhow, but once again, just to repeat, the morning show and the show kind of combined today from 11 to 1, an abbreviated show on a Friday here heading into summer. And we'll talk about all those Gamecock related topics and college sports topics, including, I mentioned basketball and the NCAA. I guess they sort of snuck this in. I guess Charlie Baker was at the Big 12 meetings in I think Orlando. Yeah, make everybody from Arizona and Colorado go to Florida for the meetings. It's really good job, centrally located there. Anyway, and it just kind of snuck out that they're planning on expanding the NCAA tournament as soon as this coming season to 72 to 76 teams. You may say, well, that's what 8 more teams, whatever. I think it's a huge. I mean, I don't want to say mistake, but I just don't like it right now. I mean, football is in complete and utter chaos because you have the transfer portal and NIL stuff, the house settlement, which affects every sport. And then at the same time, you've had a ton of conference expansion. We've only had 1 year with that. That doesn't make any sense. Last year was sort of, I mean, the one way to look at it is it was a great season. It was, the game itself was great. It was intriguing and it had just as much drama, just as much attention, just as many eyeballs, that kind of thing. Some great moments. But, last year there were some things about it that were just sucked. And nobody talks about that. They just talk about the big games and all that. Maybe that's what sells. But to me, the magic of college football has always been about everybody else, including the Blue Bloods. When you take the Blue Bloods and then you include everybody else or all the big games, but then the fact that, as Josh Pate says, you've got this, 6-5 Gamecock team, a 7-4 Tennessee team late in the season, and they're kind of fighting to get bowl positioning and stuff, and that's a big game for those fans and that fan base and stuff. And I think number one, you kind of still have big games, but it's taken something out of it. The whole playoff thing did. And then number two, it's you don't get some of those games you care about anymore. I mean, Carolina didn't play 3 teams that it's played for 30 something years last year. And that's just in the SEC where the expansion made sense. Think if you're in the Big Ten. I mean, it's something that was just weird. Big Ten game. It's in Los Angeles. I'm sorry. It was just, there was a lot about last year that I think we'll look back on and say, boy, that was a what show. But, so there's all this going on with football, right? Men's basketball, we just went through a tournament where it very much resembled the women's tournament, which I know for Gamecock fans is exciting, but at times in that tournament, you sort of know who's going to win. There's very few upsets. It's the same cluster of teams, maybe one different. I mean, Arizona made the Final Four a couple of years ago. They're not really a powerhouse. Mississippi State under Schaefer rose and then kind of fell back to the pack, that kind of thing. The men's tournament this year largely resembled that with very few upsets. And of course, first thing people say is, well, NIL has allowed these teams to stock the roster and they're buying all the players. And you know what? In football, I think lower level um, players that jump up has sort of helped with, like, we discussed depth a lot yesterday on coffee. It's helped with the depth for some of these teams. I don't necessarily know that it's destroyed the group of five. I've always thought they should have their own playoff. They're like I think it'd be much more, that level of football would be much more intriguing, much more popular, and probably make just as much money. But it's not a situation where necessarily, and it's because of the nature of football, because players get better. It's a talent maximization game. The best players in one season may not be the best players in the next because guys go up, guys get complacent. It's college. That's been my whole point about all this. This is still college. Um, I mean, I don't know that, especially at the FCS level, that we're going to see a team that's able to pull off a shocking upset. But we're also living in a world where last year Toledo went to Mississippi State and beat them by 24 points. We're living in a world where Georgia State beat Vanderbilt, which was a bowl team from the SEC. Vanderbilt beat Georgia Tech by 22 in the Birmingham Bowl and lost to Georgia State. So, football's so unique. And then, you never know with the guys that are outbound from Power Four going to that level. Mario Anderson, for example, for Memphis had a really good year. You just don't know. I mean, it makes football a little more, I guess, unpredictable within the certain brackets. But in basketball, about 2-3 years ago, I know some basketball coaches, they were like, well, we've just decided that we're going to recruit guys out of high school because so much at the Power 6 level or whatever is portal. And then we're going to develop them and know we're going to lose them in 2 years, and we're going to develop somebody else. Smart. But then the last tournament came along, and the narrative is, oh, well, it's watered down. I contended that, well, there's been seasons before where it's been chalk in the big dance, even before all this. I mean, it's not, it's not every year that you have a miracle run. Some years, a couple of years ago, we had what? Florida Atlantic, Miami, San Diego State, and UConn. So that San Diego State and Mountain West School, FAU, they're now in the American. I think they were maybe in the Sun Belt then. And then Miami was a kind of an unexpected team out of the ACC, and then UConn, of course, won it all, ran away with it. Yeah, I that was a very short time ago. I think there was NIL and things like that. But so I don't necessarily buy that in basketball that we're heading towards a big dance that group of five or mid majors can't win. Mid majors is the proper term. Group of five is a kind of a football term. That said, what happened last year. There were very vocal folks that said, this wasn't as fun. They've screwed basketball and college up on the men's side anyway with the way they schedule, i.e., they start the season way too early. You have a ton of games in November that nobody cares about outside of a handful of schools. Nobody really watches it on TV. College bowl games, which allegedly are meaningless to everybody, they outview college basketball. I mean, it didn't make much sense to me. I was sitting in Nashville in mid-November, and it was a fun game to watch. We were going to go, my wife and I were going to see Patrick Davis at the Bluebird Cafe. And we were out having a little dinner and some drinks at a sports bar near Vanderbilt. And North Carolina and Kansas were playing in basketball. And the Kansas Nashville Jayhawk Club or whatever was sitting there. I mean, there were a bunch of fans there. It was one of the best games I've ever seen, 92-89. And I'm sitting there thinking, Kansas fans care, North Carolina fans care. Nobody else cares. It's football season. And you can see that with the crowds, even at good schools that eventually end up being pretty good. So they've screwed that up. And then in December, when you kind of maybe would like some basketball, they stopped doing the Christmas time tournaments. Most of the time, you have like a game a week because you stop for exams and you stop for Christmas. And so nobody fundamentally gives a flip. Half the country starts paying attention in January when conference play starts, and then the rest of the country doesn't pay any attention until they start filling out their brackets for March Madness weekend one. Now, why is that such a big draw? Because the upsets and the drama are fun, right? It's fun. You know, Robert Morris gave Alabama a game for a while. I mean, they were one of the competitive first round games. That was fun to watch, you know? And yeah, there are blowouts and things like that. And I think there's something to be said too for when you get to the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight that you'd like to see the better teams play the better teams. But that said, you know, the fun of it is in any given year, anything can happen. It's sort of an unpredictable thing. And that's what makes it March Madness. So Charlie Baker, who sneaks off to Orlando, just casually says 72 to 76 teams. And I'm like, that's just going to water it down. Like, especially if the narrative holds true with the bigger schools that can pay are just sucking all the players out of the lower level rosters. And I'm like, so you're going to add another round. And they're not going to sit there and go, well, all right, you know, we're now going to take the SEC is not a good example because they put 14 to 16 in. So we're not going to take the seventh team and eighth team from the ACC and Big 12 and play them off to let them go in and get an 11 seed. You know, kind of like some of the 6-11 games or 7-10 games. You get to play. You have to go to Dayton and you get to play in winter. So I don't think they're going to do it like that. I think they're going to put these mid majors to have to play each other and then go play in a 2-15 game or 3-14 or whatever. I don't like that. Now, if they do it where they put they match up power schools to insert them into the middle of the bracket, yeah, maybe that's a little intriguing. But and it doesn't hurt it that bad because it's 8 teams max. But why touch the NCAA tournament right now? You know, why you've kind of screwed with that sport enough. I mean, I still love that sport. So anyway, we'll talk about that on the show. Once again, the show 11 to 1 today on the Chief Sports Network with JB, Phil, and myself. We talked about official visitors, and as far as the football topic du jour, I promised you guys this earlier this week, so I'm going to get into it. As we continue our post-spring review, the edge position has been one of, I guess they call it edge now. Everybody calls it edge now. And oh well, I still like defensive end or end. I don't, I get it. And I think one of the reasons they changed the word is, in defensive end with some of the 3-man front defenses like Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. It's really kind of an inside guy. And then you use a buck linebacker or a jack linebacker. In some more exotic schemes, you call it a hero. And it's kind of like the spur. It's kind of like a hybrid type. And there are a lot of players like that. Outside linebackers is what they call them in the NFL. But it doesn't fit neatly into one category, but you can put all those guys in the edge category and then call the other ones defensive linemen. And so I guess that makes sense. So I'm going to stop complaining about calling it edge. When I think of edge, I normally think of, the guitarist from U2, The Edge, or The Razor's Edge, the movie. So I don't know. Anyway, it's an edge. So these are your pass rushers, your guys that are your outside defenders along the defensive front. And of course, any conversation has to start with Dylan Stewart. Now, Dylan had a big spring. Yes, I mean I know that shocks everybody that Dylan Stewart was really good, and that he can get better. We spent a lot of time talking about Jadeveon Clowney yesterday because we went back and looked at the 2012 season. And if you guys remember, Jadeveon Clowney got was good as a freshman. I mean, shoot, by game two at Georgia, I mean, he came through the line and was free and literally shook Aaron Murray, and the ball popped loose, and Melvin Ingram got his second touchdown of that game. Wild 45-42 win. That was in 2011. And by the Clemson game, in 2011, he was getting sacks and stuff. But he didn't start. Melvin Ingram, Devin Taylor, and then they'd slide Ingram inside, and Clowney would be the edge. Really a pretty brilliant plan by Brad Lawing and Ellis Johnson and that defensive coaching staff to maximize their personnel. But you remember what he became in 2012. Just a dominant player in college football. They're talking about him winning the Heisman and stuff. But I remember how much better he got. Well, Dylan Stewart can take a similar step forward. Dylan's different than Clowney. Clowney's a bigger, longer guy. Dylan though is big and long. They're listed kind of similar, same size, but Dylan is a different. He can bend and contort. Lenore Sellers can too at quarterback. That's just an aside. If you haven't noticed, he does that thing where it looks like he's bending in half, falling over, and then amazingly escapes. But Dylan Stewart's looks like Gumby out there, just and gets around you. The poor guy got held all year. College football should be embarrassed by turning on that tape. I'm sure Shane Beamer and everybody else is, sent in that film to the league office. Because literally, if you don't hold him, chances are he's going to do something to mess you up. But playing against the run, I mean, there were times last year, he met some guys that gave him a game, the Missouri game, Clemson game. But he's a type of player that's just going to keep working and maximizing. And so you got Dylan Stewart. And all conversations start with him. And when you have him, you have a chance. I know it's nice to look at Kyle Kennard's season last year and say, well, that guy was really good. And he was. He's the Bronco Nagurski Award winner. He had 11 and a half sacks. He also was stellar against the run. I mean, Kyle had a great year. And it's if you're going to be a really good defense, you need another guy over there because they're just going to go away from you and Dylan Stewart. I'm still curious to see if they don't move Dylan around a little bit to where you don't just have offenses lining up and saying, all right, we're going to chip in, put another tight end over here. We're going to put two or three guys. I think that's, or we're going to put a bunch of blockers and run right at him and past him, I'll be curious to see if they do that. But so with that out of the way, Dylan Stewart heading into the season is one of the best in college football. I wouldn't be surprised to see his sack total go up this year, and all that good stuff. So that's where it all starts. That's a starter you can pencil in. Now, the rest of it's interesting. Talking to Darren Usher the other day, getting feedback from people because a couple of these guys weren't in for spring, right? And they were from the portal, and we'll get to those guys in a second. But like Darren said, like I said, can you replace Kyle Kennard? No, but you can replace him in the aggregate, as the movie Moneyball said. And Darren Usher, you can check out that video on our Chief Sports South Carolina YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you got a combo of guys that can be productive, you can replace that production. And you look at these three players, and they're all a little different. JT Gear is a player that they actually started ahead of Dylan Stewart in the Old Dominion game last year. He's from Belton Honeypath, Syracuse. Yeah, he got a good spring. I think he needs to continue to work to take a step forward and to put the injuries in the rearview mirror. Frankly, stay healthy, that kind of thing. But he's capable. He's capable. In 2023, he was good enough before he hurt himself in preseason camp to where he was going to be a starter and probably would have started the whole year at that edge position where Carolina, his injury was probably understated a little bit. He tried to play through it, but it just didn't work. But that's a guy they're counting on. I mentioned at one point that there was some buzz out there. He may get in the portal, but he's staying and coming back, and I think that's good. I think that helps the Gamecocks. Brian Thomas Jr. is a player they love. You look, Brian Thomas Jr. is listed with 6'2", 250, 249, not ideal size. The whole thing with him, and I don't know that he can't do this, is getting better against the run, which he did make some strides last year. Do you know Brian Thomas Jr. played in the red zone goal line defense? Yeah, I noticed that. Other teams that get inside the field, they put him in. So I think that, and that's not all the time. It's just at times it was noticeable. He's worked really hard. He's a player they love. He's a developmental guy, if there is one. I probably, if you put a gun to my head, think he'll start, though it's not certainly not set in stone. But he's one of those save your best for the later in your career guys, and it's happened before. I still remember Marcus Howard at Georgia from Hanahan High School. It was a linebacker out of high school. He worked and worked and worked, and I think it was the '07 season finally. I mean, he was one of the best pass rushers in the SEC that year. So, Vic Beasley from Clemson was probably another guy sort of like that. If Carolina can get anywhere close to that from Brian Thomas Jr., it's going to be a good season. But the run, you got to hold up against the run, and in my gut, that's where they're going to miss Kennard the most. I mean, 11 and a half sacks. You say you're crazy. It's 11 and a half sacks. Yeah, but watch Kyle Kennard play the run. Teams very rarely tried to test Carolina on the edge like they did in previous years once the season got rolling. Desmond Zulu is a player that I've always liked. Have been high on. Carolina won a big recruiting battle for him. He's one of those Maryland players. He's played in 24 of 25 games. And by the way, as far as the spring reset or spring info on Thomas Jr., he did have a good spring. He's coming out of the spring as a starter. So we'll see what happens. But Desmond had a really good spring too. And he had a good spring followed by a really good winter workout. The thing with him, he's always needed to get stronger, technique, all the things that you have to develop in football to do at that position. That's what he needed to work on. I've said many times, his high school team at Flowers up there in Maryland played him inside at D tackle some. He's kind of a big guy, but he's always had the tools. And it was going to they knew it was going to take some time. And plus, Carolina's had some really good players at edge. But this is his time to go in and make an impact, right? And I don't know that he can't beat Thomas Jr. out. Would I call it likely as of today? For the opener, no. Eventually, maybe. I hope so. I really hope so. So there's your top four heading in. Stewart, Thomas, Gear, Dez. Those are your guys for the top four. Now, they tried to roll six. And Darren talked the other day about the need to get edge players in to keep Stewart fresh for the fourth quarter. Yeah, you don't want Dylan Stewart. I mean, you want him out there as much as he humanly can play, but you don't want to wear him out. And that's what other teams will try to do. They'll try to mash him down and all that. And so they went to the portal. They got Damon Clowney, who's his cousin is JD Clowney, and George Wilson. Now these guys are interesting case studies. And I look, folks, I'll admit I'm not, when they got both these, Darren kind of with JB the other day was like, well, There are no depth pieces. Everybody comes in and competes. That's true. But just looking at it, I'm like, there's going to have to be a major step for both, just because, they're coming from lower levels. Wilson's coming from FCS at Campbell. Clowney's coming from Charlotte. Clowney, of course, was going to Louisville. Both have been good as far as situational pass rushers are concerned, but not in the SEC. Clowney played in the SEC at Ole Miss for a little bit, and I think they kind of moved him around, tried to play him at linebacker some. But they're both edges. Now, with George Wilson, it's fascinating. Of course, he was committed to South Carolina for a while. He's a Virginia Beach area kid. Went to Florida State. They had some changes. He was Audi 5000. Really was like 212 coming out of high school. Now he's in the 230s. If you get him to 240, that'd be good. But he's extremely quick off the edge. Clowney's more of a guy that if he just plays like, consistently and he's capable of and gets a bit better, he's got a shot to be kind of a duo. Wilson, to me, is more of a pass rusher. Now, that's just my opinion here, but I think both can help. And I think that, what we're looking at here with these two folks, as far as how good they end up being, this is would be another feather in the cap for edge coach Sterling Lucas, where you get a player that, has had the tools, obviously as a high school recruit and, or not, or had flashes of brilliance like Kyle Kennard, and they get them in and get the most out of them. We don't have enough, I guess, of a sample size yet to say South Carolina as a program under Shane Beamer is really, really good at doing this. These 1 year guys that come in and they get a lot better. But there's some examples. I mean, it's trending in that direction, especially at this position. So if Sterling Lucas can get these guys to just kind of be in there and be part of the rotation and make plays, then that says a lot about him, which there's already a lot of good things to say about his ability to develop and recruit, and just a tremendous hire by Shane Beamer there. But, so of the two, Clowney and Wilson, complete package wise, I like DeMond Clowney a little more. Pass rushing wise, probably would be just George Wilson. Wilson's more of a longer player, but we'll see what happens. I think that those are sort of, there's a lot of wild cards here. You got Thomas, who's the most productive, and been the most steady. You've got Gear, who struggled with injuries, but has done some really good things to earn an opportunity, especially in practice, and has flashed at times in games. You got Desmond Umazulu, the upside guy that is, that you hope he's ready this year. He's developmental and he's played some, not really done much, but he's got all the ability. So he's an upside guy. You got Clowney and Wilson, the journeyman, returning to Power 5 level football or Power 4 level football. That we're both highly touted recruits. Clowney, by the way, is another Maryland player. And then, of course, I mentioned George Wilson's from the Chesapeake Bay 757. Again, players where Carolina wants to go recruit and establish inroads. But, so there's an eclectic group besides Dylan Stewart. But this room, to me, as far as pass rushing goes, I think they'll be fine. The concern, again, with the defense, and maybe it doesn't end up this way, because I'm a little more bullish on the interior. I'm very bullish at linebacker. And maybe they can shut down the run consistently and get to those passing downs. That would be big, because I think they've got enough pass rushers to make some things happen. And then finally, Anthony Addison is a true freshman from Sumter that, Shane Beamer's mentioned a couple of times. Hale McGranahan, loved that guy out of high school. He's a football player. The issue is he's like 6'3", 230 when he's coming in. So we'll see if he can make some gains, but it wouldn't surprise me to see him, make some noise this year, whether it's as a rotational guy like Desmond was his freshman year or what. I don't have any update on Jaylen Brown, the Missouri transfer, and he's different than all these guys in that he's a bigger end that man, if he could somehow find a way back, and I don't know that that's likely this year, I think that would work. But he's just a redshirt freshman, Jalen Brown. So we'll see what happens. But overall, I think this group's in good shape. I think that when you kind of look at it for this year, and there's another freshman too, Quay Dodd from Eastside High School. It's about 6'6", 240, 250. Look out for him in a couple of years. He's a down the road guy, but actually, from what I heard about him in the spring, he actually played pretty well. He keeps getting better and better. I can't rule anything out when it comes to a freshman either way, but did want to mention him briefly. So I think you got. I just mentioned what 8, 9 guys, including Brown and Dodd, who I don't expect to be in. That's plenty to rotate in and out. You just don't want to drop off. And they did rotate 6 last year, so I think that's the number they're looking for at both tackle and edge. But it was a good spring for this group. Sterling Lucas's group continues to work hard to develop, and that's the name of the game. And Sterling's certainly proven he can do that. All right, once again, one big show today from 11 to 1 on Inside the Gamecocks, the show and the morning show. I'm JC Shurburtt. Have a great weekend, everyone. This has been Coffee. Holla at you soon.